You don't feel like you belong anywhere, and you don't know why. Not in an obvious way, not like you're completely alone, but more like you're never fully part of anything. You can be around people, in conversations, in groups, even with friends, and still feel slightly out of place, like you're there, but not really included, like something is missing. If you've ever felt like this, there is a reason. The subtle nature of not belonging. The feeling of not belonging is rarely loud. It doesn't always show up as rejection. It often feels quiet, subtle, easy to overlook. You might notice it in small moments, when you're in a group conversation and feel like you don't quite fit in, when everyone else seems connected and you feel slightly outside, when interactions feel surface level, not because people are excluding you, but because something doesn't fully click. You can function, but not connect. One of the most confusing parts is that you can still function socially. You can talk, you can respond, you can be part of things. From the outside, everything looks normal, but internally, it feels different, like you're playing a role, like you're participating, but not connecting. The internal gap. This creates a gap between your external behavior and your internal experience. You appear engaged, but you don't feel it. And over time, that gap becomes more noticeable. You start to question yourself. Why does this feel different for me? Why do others seem more connected? Past experiences shape perception. One of the biggest influences is your past. If you've experienced moments of feeling left out, not being understood, not fully accepted, your brain remembers, not always consciously, but it builds patterns, and those patterns affect how you interpret situations. Expectation of disconnection. Over time, your brain may start to expect disconnection, even in neutral situations. You enter social interactions already slightly guarded, not fully open, not fully relaxed, because part of you anticipates distance. The role of overthinking. Overthinking amplifies this. When you constantly analyze what to say, how you sound, how others perceive you, you're not fully present. You're observing yourself, and that creates distance, not just internally, but also externally. Emotional guarding. To protect yourself, you may hold back emotionally, not fully express yourself, not fully open up, because vulnerability feels risky, and that creates a subtle barrier. Others may not notice it clearly, but they feel it. Why it feels like nowhere. Over time, this pattern creates a specific feeling, not belonging anywhere, because it's not tied to one place. It follows you, different people, different environments, same feeling. It's not that you don't belong. This is the important part. It's not necessarily that you don't belong. It's that your connection to belonging is disrupted. Your system is slightly guarded, slightly distant, and that affects how you experience situations. What actually helps relearning belonging? One of the most important things to understand is that the feeling of belonging is not something you either have or don't have. It's something your brain learns, and sometimes it needs to relearn it. If you've spent a long time feeling disconnected, your brain adapts to that state. It becomes familiar, even comfortable in a strange way. So, when moments of connection happen, they might feel unfamiliar, even slightly uncomfortable. not because they are wrong, but because they are different. And that's why belonging doesn't suddenly appear. It builds slowly, through repeated experiences, through small moments where you feel even slightly more connected than before. Stop trying to fit in. A common reaction to not feeling like you belong is trying harder to fit in, adjusting how you speak, changing how you act, trying to match the energy of others. But this often creates the opposite effect, because when you're focused on fitting in, you're not being present, you're managing yourself, and that creates distance. Belonging doesn't come from perfect alignment. It comes from authenticity, not extreme openness, but small moments of being slightly more real. Allow imperfect interaction. Another important shift is allowing interactions to be imperfect. Not every conversation needs to feel meaningful. Not every moment needs to click. Sometimes belonging grows in ordinary, even slightly awkward moments. When you stop expecting every interaction to feel right, you remove pressure. And that pressure is often what blocks connection, because connection doesn't require perfection, it requires space. Reducing internal noise. A big part of feeling disconnected comes from internal noise, constant thoughts, self-monitoring, analysis. When your mind is active, your attention is divided. Part of you is in the moment, part of you is observing yourself, and that split reduces connection. So instead of trying to feel more, it can help to think less, not by forcing silence, but by gently returning your attention to the conversation, to the moment, to what's actually happening. Small moments matter more than big ones. People often think belonging comes from big experiences, deep conversations, strong emotional moments, meaningful connections. But often, it builds in much smaller ways. A short conversation that feels slightly easier, a moment where you don't overthink as much, a brief sense of comfort. These moments may feel insignificant, but they are not. They are signals to your brain that connection is possible, and over time, those signals accumulate. Consistency over intensity. Another important point is that consistency matters more than intensity. One deep conversation doesn't create lasting belonging, but repeated, small interactions can. Because your brain learns through patterns, not through isolated moments. So instead of looking for strong emotional experiences, it can be more helpful to focus on regular interaction, steady presence, small, repeated exposure, understanding your own patterns. Finally, one of the most important things you can do is understand your own patterns. Notice, when do you feel most disconnected? What situations trigger it? What thoughts appear? Not to judge yourself, but to become aware. Because once you see the pattern, you are no longer fully controlled by it. And that awareness alone creates space for change. If you feel like you don't belong anywhere, it doesn't mean you are different in a negative way. It means your connection to others has become quieter, and that can change. If this felt familiar, then you're not as alone in this as you think. And if you want to understand your mind better, you can stay here